political tensions that could affect subnational stability. The African Democratic Congress ADC has accused the president of attempting to destabilize opposition coalitions by influencing state-level party structures, which could undermine political cohesion in some states. On the other hand, the president's policies, they say, such as enhancing the role of the Auditor-General and improving procurement processes, aim to strengthen governance at both federal and subnational levels, potentially reducing corruption and improving service delivery. Yet, opposition leaders are also saying that this is pointing to a government that is failing to stabilize the economy because the economic policies are not trickling down to the people at the lowest levels, making worse the situations that are already worse. Is national politics choking subnational autonomy, or are the governors running for their political lives? This is the Eastern Eye. I am Alex Ogbodo. Welcome to the Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Joining me tonight is Professor Chijioke Uwasomba, who's a public affairs analyst, and also he is a scholar. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the program.
Thank you.
So I guess that the first question will be, are you happy with what you're seeing around the country? Because it looks like every day a new chapter is turned. And some say is a theater of the absurd. Some say is expect the unexpected. For you, what is it exactly?
You know, Nigeria is a place where anything goes. Is a country of the absurd. And so for most of us who have lived in Nigeria for quite a number of years, we're not surprised because the foundation of the country is such that it cannot but be absurd. So it's a theater of the absurd right from its beginnings. So it didn't start, today. And the foundational crisis of the country, threw up things of this nature, and worse things, will happen because those who are governing Nigeria, were not prepared to be governors of Nigeria. They don't know what it means to run a country like ours. And so you shouldn't be surprised worse things are going to happen unless there is a change in leadership. The leadership we have currently is characterized by all sorts of contradictions. And when you have such leadership to pilot the affairs of a country like Nigeria, a country of more than 250 million people, more crises, will happen. So it doesn't surprise, people like us who have seen Nigeria for many years. We've seen Nigeria from its beginnings. Unless the foundation is changed, Nigeria is not going to make progress. And so we see a continuation, of the theater of the absurd in the country.
So now you've mentioned about government, and anytime government is mentioned, everyone looks at the center. And when we look around, shortly before the ADC staged their coalition arrangement, it was a defection galore from any other political party to the APC. But have you noticed that since after the coming on board of the ADC, that the defection galore has halted? Is this an indication that, well, maybe there could be something here? Or do you think this is just a flash on the pan?
It is not. I don't think it's a flash on the pan. It depends on how the momentum is encouraged. The presence of Peter Obi, it is the presence of Peter Obi, in the new party that you see another momentum. And I hope, that the ADC managers allow this momentum to be sustained. It is because Peter Obi has gone that direction. Peter Obi is a storm, in Nigeria's politics. And that momentum, will get to a crescendo if they allow Obi, to have some level of control, in what they are doing. As you rightly said, people were drifting towards the APC. The drift wasn't a one-party phenomenon. It wasn't a one-party system phenomenon. People began to drift, towards APC for various, reasons, especially the governors. Take, for example, the governor, of Delta State and the former one, they moved to APC out of fear, of tomorrow, of what might happen, because they know the skeletons in their cupboard. The same thing with the governor of Akwa Ibom. Akwa Ibom had been a PDP state since 1999, and there was no reason for the movement. And so when they moved, they were moving not because something else had happened, but because they became afraid of their shadows and decided to drift to APC. But you can see now, with the few efforts of the coalition, groups, that even the APC itself is beginning, to be afraid of some kind of tsunami, and you will expect, some tsunami in APC if the coalition managers are able, to do things that are proper. You will realize that even the APC, some of the APC elements will drift, to the ADC. So I'm not surprised, with us, what is happening. Nigeria needs a change, even though, the characters in the ADC, they're not the best. But you would do with what we have. We deal with what we have. We associate with what we have, because we're not going to bring, people from the heaven who will use our politicians to change Nigeria, because Nigeria needs, some level of change. Otherwise, it cannot be.
All right. So, I haven't listened to you now with what has unfolded since the coalition was announced. Do you think that any other governor who was maybe afraid of what could happen in 2027, do you think they are having a rethink at this moment, saying that, well, maybe I have an alternative?
A good number of them who would have wanted, to drift to the APC, I am sure they're not going to. There are also some. Why do governors run to APC? They are running to APC because they are afraid of their shadows. Some of these governors are not accountable to their people. Some of these governors are not delivering development. Their politics is politics, of the stomach, and so they are afraid, of their shadows, because the central has some security reports, on them, and so that's why you notice that they were running, to the APC. They are not delivering. The governors are not delivering development. Governors have a lot, in their kitty to be able to deliver development to their people. But they are not doing that. Each governor in Nigeria gets some humongous amount of money as security votes. What do they do, with the money? Okay, I am happy that the governor of Enugu State, I never gave him a chance because, I thought that he was part of the politics of Abraham family. So I didn't know, that the young man would have something to offer, the Igbo people, the Enugu people. And I think, that, he should be encouraged, to be able to give development, governance, to the people. Because those who say government has no business in business is lying, it's a ruse. In fact, government has to be in business because government has humongous amount of money to distribute as far as, development is concerned. And in a neo-colonial environment like Nigeria, where the state, must play an important role in development. And so you can't dismiss the state, you can't dismiss government from being active in developing the society. So there are governors, and as I said, you can use the governor of Enugu State. And I think the Abia State governor, is also on track. And I think that we will encourage such governors that are delivering development to do more, for the people. So governors have a lot to do if they want to give development to their people.
Yeah, there's always that factor of who brought in the governor. And if the governor, unquote, brought in himself, so he would go on without any qualms as to who would interfere with his re-election. But the real crux of the matter for a lot of the governors is re-election. Some of them are afraid of either being removed or that they would lose their elections in 2027 if they don't align with the president. Could this be a very valid consideration, politically speaking, in our climate?
It is not valid for those who are not delivering development, governors whose programs are not people-oriented. Governors that are stealing money will be afraid of the central government. But governors who are delivering will not be afraid. It is the people that determine who governs. These processes are determined by the processes are democratic. So it is the people. When you have a governor who is doing the right thing, who is delivering development, who understands the aspirations of their people, such governors cannot be afraid. Remember, when the Obas in Anambra State wanted to take over Anambra State to determine the governance processes there, decided to remove, Governor Ngige then. Remember what happened and how Ngige was able to change for the period that he was there, the governance system in Anambra State. So whatever that is happening in Anambra State today is a product of what Ngige did, because Ngige himself also knew that he came, through an illegal process, but he wanted to identify with the people, and he did that, and he was able to deliver. So if a governor is delivering, he doesn't need to be afraid at all. One was surprised when we saw the man in the guy in Anambra State, when Tinubu came, and instead of defending his people, he sold his people and created an impression that he is a slave. He left the issues in contention and began to attack Peter Obi, who had left the governance of Anambra State for many years. So you have governors that are slavish. Governors that are slavish, like the one in Anambra State, will be afraid to do things that are proper, to defend their people, to give good governance and ensure that their people are defended at all costs. But governors that are not sure-footed, that are not delivering development, that are doing things on propaganda basis, will be afraid of the central government. And such people will always remain slavish. And the one in Anambra State, and there are quite others, for example, is slavish. And such people cannot defend their people, because they don't realize that it is the people, that democracy is about the people, and that it is the people that determine who governs them.
It is the people that determines who governs them. At this point, really, there isn't a role for the people. The only role they have is to maybe cry out, write something, or say something. But the only time they have a proper role, isn't it, is in 2027. For those, the election cycles fall in 2027. But again, that is another worry, whether votes will count, because that's where the central government holds the key. And that's the reason why some of the governors are panicking, especially governors who still have the opportunity of a second term. Do you think it is misplaced that these governors are worried that maybe that the federal might catch up with them and displace them, stopping them from a potential second term in office?
Alex, let me give you an example. Let's go back into history. In 1983, in the eastern part of Nigeria, former Imo State and former Anambra State, because the central government under the MPN of Alhaji Shehu Shagari wanted to rig the election in the eastern part of Nigeria. The MPN was not popular in the eastern part of Nigeria. It was the MPP, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe of blessed memory, that was in charge of that zone of the country. And when it was discovered that the MPN wanted to rig the election, the people stood firm. In fact, Mbakwe himself, because Mbakwe was a popular governor of Imo State, had to intervene and even dictate the outcome of that election by announcing, the results. The same thing happened in Anambra State, former Anambra State. The same thing also happened in Ondo State. Oh, if you remember the Omoborio saga and what happened and how the people responded. Central government cannot rig elections where people are popular, where candidates are popular. They cannot where a party is popular. The central government will find it difficult to be able to do that. It has happened in the history of Nigeria. It will happen again. So this time around, because the people are becoming aware of what is happening in the country, how monies are stolen, how they are exploited by the political class. And so the people are aware, they are conscious, they are going to defend their votes. And we will keep preaching to insist that people must defend, their votes. So under the charged atmosphere of people, insisting that they are going to defend their votes, those riggers, those, forces from the central will have to be afraid. They will have to be tactful. They will have, to ensure that they don't create more crisis, for Nigeria. So 2027 is going to be different, from what had happened in the past, because people are aware, people have suffered a lot. Regime after regime had promised Nigerians of good life, had promised Nigerians of better days, had promised Nigerians of hope and all sorts of things. But the shenanigans continue, as we see currently in Nigeria, so much so that the people are becoming politically aware, politically conscious, and they will have to defend, their votes. So we are entering, that process. We're entering that regime when people will not be afraid because they will have to defend, their votes. So those governors who are afraid, who are running away from their shadows, who think that the central government, the government in Abuja, will undermine them, is because they are corrupt, and they are afraid, to be able to defend themselves and their people. Any governor that is not corrupt, any governor that is well-meaning, any governor that is doing, and pursuing the interest, of the citizens, have no reason to be afraid of whatever it is that the central government does. We're not experiencing that for the first time. We had experienced it, before, and so it is not new that the central will want to muzzle this way to take, some states. But I can assure you that governors that are doing their work properly, developing their people, and doing proper things will have no reason to be afraid, of what the central government is scheming, to do.
So, typically, it's easier said, really. But on paper, that there's a problem, there's a challenge. And some people who are out there, who are skeptical, who are concerned about the outcome of 2027 elections, some even allege that the results have already been written. But the coalition is here. But it looks like the coalition is getting into the head of APC, because every second, every minute, they are talking about members of the coalition. Could this be an indication that maybe the coalition is onto something?
The coalition is just, beginning. Even at this stage, it is incorrect. But I think, with time, the coalition will be able to build up its momentum. The federal government, of course, the APC is not going to stand idly by. It will do all sorts of things to undermine, the coalition. But I think, that with time, the coalition will be able to navigate, some of these problems that you have pointed out. Yes, we have found out that in Nigeria, the electoral management body could cook up, and I think that one of the things that the coalition managers, should insist on is to ensure that the electoral, processes, are such, that will not give opportunity, to electoral management body to be able to cook up figures, as it were. And so we will need, a law that makes it compulsory for results to be transmitted right, from the polling booth, so that voters and other participants, within a particular polling booth will be able to know the outcome of a particular election, before the results, are taken away to the central collation center. The results, should be known, to people, because it is when results have been moved from the polling booths to the central collation center that all sorts of manipulations, take place. If you remember what happened in 2023, or even the election that took place in Edo State last year, these attempts, are there, and I think that we need to put in place a structure, a legal structure that makes it compulsory for the electoral management body to be able, to count and announce the number of votes within a particular, polling booth before taking them to the central collation center.
All right. We'll take a break here on the Eastern Eye. When we return, we will talk about what the people could do to really own this democracy. Stay with us. To the Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Joining me from Osun State is Professor Chijioke Uwasomba. Thank you so much for staying on the line. So let's talk about the people. If you like, you can say they are the electorate. They are the ones who bear the brunt of if election is free or if it is not free, as it were, if it is rigged, if it is controversial. I think every election contested in Nigeria since 1999 had ended up at the Supreme Court. So is this an indication that something needs to be done about our electoral process, about the trust that people have in that process? And do you think that it is fair on the Nigerian people that they pour out in their millions, yet an election would not end the way they are intended? By that I mean, when people vote, their votes don't seem to amount to what they intend for that vote to amount to.
Yes, that's part of the underdevelopment crisis that countries like Nigeria face, because we are so much underdeveloped, that things don't go the way they ought to be. If I had my way, elections, couldn't be determined by the court. Look at what happened in Imo State some 4 years ago, where the person who came forth in an election through the instrumentality of the Supreme Court was made to become the governor of Imo State. So, because of the nature of our electoral system and the judicial organization, they realized that people who didn't win election become selected by the judicial system. So you have a selectorate instead of the electorate determining, who is governor or president. These are some, of the things, some of the struggles, that those, because democracy itself is a process. It's not given people must have to fight to ensure that the proper things are done. And that's why political parties become important. Political parties don't exist, just because they want to win elections. It is true, that they have to compete for elections, but they also are given the power to be able to mobilize the people, mobilize consciousness. Because if the political parties are strong, the courts, themselves will be afraid. But because the political parties, you don't even have internal democracy in the political parties, you will then see that these parties have internal contradictions, and these internal contradictions don't allow them to perform their roles, their assigned roles, their historic responsibilities. And in the process, you then realize that the judicial system hijacks the entire system and imposes, somebody, on the people at the state level, at the local government level, or at the federal level. So these are things, that Nigerians are confronted with. And I think that when the judicial system notices that Nigerians are mobilized, they will be afraid. Because some of the decisions that these judges take are products of the society. No judge, no responsible judge will want to go and give a judgment that undermines, the people. But when the people are not conscious of their rights, when they are not doing the proper thing, when political parties are cash and carry, arrangements, when there is corruption everywhere, the judicial system cashes in, on that to impose its will, on the people. So this time around, many forces will be interested in ensuring, that I know it's a Herculean task, but nothing is impossible. When the people are ready, those forces that undermine them will be afraid to operate. That's the way I see it. But when the people look the other way, when the people allow themselves to be manipulated, these forces, these reactionary forces that don't want change, status quo-oriented forces, will do everything to undermine the people the more. So democracy is about the people. And so when they decide, when they are conscious, these forces, either at the electoral management level or the federal level or the judicial system, will be afraid to undermine the aspirations and interests of the people. Because when the electorate determines the outcome of the elections, then the people's agony will continue as we are experiencing in Nigeria today.
So, at the end of the day, 2027 is not too far away, but it's not here immediately with us. Do you think that people who still feel some anxiety about 2027, that they are right to feel that anxiety? Because 2023 came with high hopes, with the wave that came, people expected some change, but maybe it wasn't the change some of them thought would happen that actually happened. Do you think that in 2027 that the people will be expecting something that will maybe give them a glimmer of hope?
Well, what sustains life, what sustains human beings is hope. We have to hope even in the midst of agony, in the midst of anomy that we are witnessing in our country. We must hope for the good. We must hope for the betterment of the society. We must hope that a new crop of people with intelligence, with understanding, pro-people, with pro-people economic policies will emerge. We cannot, because of what we are experiencing currently, and say there is no hope and allow these people who have hijacked power to continue. We must hope and rouse our people to believe in a new Nigeria, to believe in the possibility of the emergence of a better person that will give Nigerians the opportunity to live life that is better, life that is qualitative. I know that most Nigerians are not happy with what is happening They have given up because of their experience. Nigerians have seen poverty. Nigerians have seen humiliation. Nigerians have seen exploitation. Nigerians have seen deceit. There is nothing that is negative that has not come the way of Nigerians. And those things are capable of making them to be negative. But what drives life, what drives the people is the capacity to hope that there will be a new beginning, that, it is good to hope. That's what keeps people alive. And so in spite of, what we're seeing, Nigerians are hopeful that a day shall come when they will be liberated through the electoral process and not through a selectorate that we have been witnessing over the years. And so I urge Nigerians that in spite of what we are seeing today, in spite of all the negativities, that there is a possibility, and change agents will continue to preach and give Nigerians an opportunity to hope that the best shall come someday.
So just before I let you go, it's currently in Nigeria we don't have independent candidacy, and the only way for anyone to emerge for elective position is through a political party. Do you think that the way our political parties are currently structured, that it leaves much to be desired, or do you think that they are just okay the way they are?
Nobody who understands Nigeria and what happens elsewhere will be happy what is happening. Our political parties are vehicles to get votes. They are just vehicles to get votes. And of course, that there are forces that are in charge, there are forces in power, there are forces that determine the direction of the society. These forces that are in power, that are in charge, are not happy. They are not interested in allowing the kind of thing that you have suggested, where you have independent, presidential candidates. Because if you have an independent presidential candidate, there will be a storm. The status quo forces, are not going to have their way. So these status quo forces are afraid. That's why they don't want that to be enshrined, in our constitution. But I think, over time, as people are campaigning, as people are promoting the idea of independent, candidacy, that it shall come to a point in Nigeria where independents will be allowed to contest election. Because the forces that are interested in retarding, growth and development in Nigeria don't want that, and that's why they are making it impossible. Every constitutional process, one constitutional process or the other, the idea of allowing independent candidacy to emerge, to be, within the constitutional order, is not allowed. I'm an optimist because I have seen Nigeria. We're not going to give up. A time shall come one day when that will be enshrined in our constitution, and the change that we'll be looking for shall come.
All right, just one more thing. Recently, just a few days ago, the Senate Constitutional Review Committee came to Enugu for the Southeast Zonal public hearing of the constitutional review process. And one of the proposals was for rotational presidency. It's something that has cropped up. One was rotational presidency. The other one was state police. These two things, they believe, they can really help the country to operate like a proper federation. Rotational presidency that takes the presidency around the regions. In fact, matter of factly, it was Governor Peter Mbada made that appeal for presidency to move around the geopolitical zones and not left for this contest. So do you think that if this happens, it will reduce all this unnecessary tussle, because people want to hold on to power because they are feeling that they may not be able to get it if all things are left the way they are? So do you believe that a rotational presidency arrangement will reduce the tension within the polity?
That's the correct thing to do. And you have mentioned another name, that we had talked about, before. Peter Mba, the current governor of your state, where you're operating from, is thinking correct. We need rotational presidency. Why people who are contesting the election for the presidency, why it's a do or die affair, is because they want power at all costs. When you have that kind of arrangement that is rotational to be enshrined in our constitution, it will limit the crisis. It will limit the dog-eat-dog character, of our politicking. And I hope they will listen to that young man and allow that to be enshrined in the constitution. But of course, those who are in charge of Nigeria are also afraid, of some regions. So they don't want some regions to occupy the office of the president, in Nigeria for whatever reasons that I do not know.
Why?
Those forces are afraid. They don't want rotational president. Well, if you go back in history, the history of Nigeria was that there was war. All right, the eastern region of Nigeria was pushed to defend itself, and there was war. And at the end of that war, the eastern region was defeated. After defeat of the eastern region, a decision was taken that somebody from that region will not be the president of Nigeria. And that thinking is very strong. That thinking holds sway, in our country. And so those who are holding on to that thinking do not want a rotational presidency, because in the end, it will go to that section of the country that the decision had been taken in the first place, that they are not going to produce one. So I think that, if good people with conscience, like Governor Mba, if they are listened to and allow the presidencies to be rotated, we realize that we're going to have development, and then there will be reduction. There will be a limitation, of, as I said earlier on, the dog-eat-dog syndrome, in our politics, where, some people, some forces will tell you that they have the population, and that democracy, is about population. I pray that they hearken, to the suggestion regarding the idea of rotating the presidency of Nigeria. The other issue which you raised, is the question of the state police. Much as we should have state police in accordance with our democratic system, in accordance, with federalism, we also must create, safeguards. We must create guardrails that will ensure that the state governors do not abuse, that kind of policing system, because we won't be running away from one negativity, arising from how the federal government has hijacked, the central policing system, and end up, with the states, because some of the governors behave like emperors. I think that, when we have that kind of system, that we must create, some guardrails that will make it impossible for the state governors to be able to use the state police to the disadvantage, of the people.
And on that note, I have to thank you so much, Professor Chijioke Uwasomba, for talking to us tonight on the Eastern Eye. Professor Chijioke Uwasomba is a public affairs analyst, but he's first of all a scholar. Thank you so much for your thoughts on the Eastern Eye tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure.
All right, and that's the Eastern Eye for tonight. Join us tomorrow same time for another episode of the program. My name is Alex Ogbodo. Nka is up next with Chinalo Rumogu Eze. Good night.